everybody, it's Cam, and I'm coming to you live while I drive. I am going to go pick up another cow, so we're gonna have 3 cows now. So I figured I'll use this time productively and chat with you about some pretty cool points I was looking at. I was just watching this video earlier, and it was kind of sort of documentary style, I guess, but basically it was a video, and it's called, I'll have to put it in the link after I'm done recording, but it was something like future timeline, something like that, or future time lapse, how AI will control gaming and humanity, or something like that. And it was by this YouTube channel called Venture City. You can check it out, and I'll put the link in later. But it was really cool. You know, and it was speculative, but it was giving like a timeline of, you know, by 2027, you know, not that it was trying to predict the time, it was just giving an example. It was like, you know, it'd show like 2027, and then it would go into this description with like pictures, almost like a slideshow of pictures, and then narrating, you know, the development of AI in the context of gaming and what's going to be happening. And then it would describe a point, and then it would go back to the number and be like 2037. It'll be like, AI has developed to the point where da da da, and it would kind of give this description. It was a really good video, and they have some other videos on their channel as well, which are pretty cool in a similar vein about different things, about like technology and AI and so forth. But you know, I was going to share a little bit about it. You should definitely watch the video. You know, it is speculative, you know, but at the same time, you could see, yep, that's where things are going to go. And one of the cool points, it was showing how, okay, you have right now, some of you, or many of you, I'm sure, are aware of ChatGPT, you know, some of these other AI things like Midjourney and DALL-E, and you know, all these AI products that are coming onto the market now. There's a lot of AI and machine learning stuff that has been happening for a while, and people are just not that aware of it. These are being marketed to the public, you know. So the fact that you're aware of it, it's kind of ironic, is because some machine learning algorithm is promoting it and boosting videos that talk about it and so forth, right? So even the awareness of these AIs is due to AI controlled systems. But now it's becoming a popular topic on the minds of people. It's becoming more mainstream. We've been talking about it for a long time. And, you know, others have too. I remember even being in college, like in 2004, you know, reading about the singularity, you know, Kurzweil, you know, all these points. But anyways, this video I was talking about was really cool, because it was saying, I'll just give you some examples. And it was saying, you know, in the very near future, let's say 2027, something like that, you're going to have AI in gaming where you'll have, for example, you know about these NPCs, right? So when you're playing a video game, there's the character that you control, and if it's an online game with other people, there's characters that are controlled by people, like human beings playing the game. But then a lot of times there's other characters in the game that you interact with at some level, or maybe they're just totally in the background, that are completely computer controlled, they're completely programmed, and you know, they may have some ability for you to interact, ask questions, and they give you different responses and so forth, but there's no human playing it behind the character. And this video was speculating about having those characters eventually be AI driven, which is kind of so obvious when you think about it that I didn't even consider that before. But imagine some or every non-playable character being AI driven. So, and then it developing to the point where these NPCs have personalities based on, you know, like speculating, like 20 different traits. They could be very empathetic, they could be understanding, caring, kind, or they could be narcissistic, psychopathic, you know, demented, psychotic, whatever, and they could have a range in between those, and these could develop based on parameters put in by programmers, but also through interaction with the human players and so forth. And so you'll have this level where when you're playing a game, you're interacting with characters in the game that are not human, but that will slowly but surely develop over the increase of technology and interaction, they'll develop into, way down in the timeline, a character that you cannot distinguish from a human being. Because, one thing I was looking at too, I've been watching a lot of videos on AI, especially the current conversation around it. And this one analyst was making this point that it's not so much the number of parameters that you put in that, because when you're doing machine learning, you have parameters, which is all the different, it's like, how can I explain it? It's like, think about an equation, okay? And you have one variable which is a number that can change, okay? It's not a set number. So that would represent some point where when the machine or the AI is learning, that's something that can alter based on feedback, and then it can strengthen a certain response or de-strengthen a certain response. And so you're training it over time. It's like, think about like, you've heard of Pavlov, right? So think about like Pavlov. And Pavlov, he rang the bell when he was giving the dogs food. I'm just giving the simplified version. And then they would salivate. And then he learned that he could just ring the bell and they would salivate even with no food present. So that was one thing, one little point of data that he was controlling within it. So the ringing the bell or the salivation, those points would be like one thing. So imagine now there's 100 different points that you're manipulating within the machine or the AI, where it's learning responses. And so it's not just a simple response, it's like a very complex one. And again, I'm way oversimplifying it. You can look up videos on what are the basics of machine learning. You need to have a kind of basic understanding of calculus, but not from the perspective of being able to do calculus, just being able to understand the basic concepts, which are really not hard to grasp at a very generalized conceptual level, even without a real strong mathematical background, like in terms of the precise, being able to do algebra and stuff like that. But I highly encourage you to look up like the math and how does machine learning work? How do neural networks work? That would be a good one to look up. But in any case, so let's say you have, another example would be, okay, think about like a snail and how many neurons are in its brain, and then how many things it can do and remember and respond to versus a human being, in which has a lot more neurons and neural connections in its brain. So the AI is very similar from that perspective of, if you can increase the number of neural connections, which is like the points of data in which that can interact, you can get a much more complex, nuanced response to events and information. And there are limitations within it, obviously, but I'm just giving you a general point. Well, this analyst I was listening to was making this point of, when you look at the number of parameters, which is kind of the analog to these neural connections, let's say. When you look at the number of parameters that are in like ChatGPT 3, and I'm making up the number because I don't remember exactly, let's just say it's 100 million or something, right? But for ChatGPT 4, the one that they're working on now, maybe they're done with it, I don't know, but it's like the next version of it, it's like 10 billion or something, it's like a huge increase, But he was saying that in itself is not what's going to really make AI fundamentally, like, from each iteration be like a whole fundamental like leap forward. Yes, it has a big impact, but he was saying it's really about the amount of data that you give the AI. So don't focus so much on, oh, look at this huge increase in the number of parameters that it's being used. Yes, that will have an effect, but it's the amount of data it gets. And therefore, he was making an interesting point that people have these sort of fantasies about AI of like, well, what if it, like the Matrix, like what if it sees humanity, studying humanity, it sees humanity as a threat, and so it's like it has to eliminate humanity or whatever. And he was saying, well, he's like, I don't think there's that actual danger, because when you look at AI, it's not human, obviously, and so it's like you're programming an AI and you're saying, look, here is what I want you to do. Here's the specific thing I want you to do. And when you do it more correctly, according to how I want it, and there's ways of mathematically doing this, but I'm just giving you the conceptual point. When you do it correctly according to kind of the guidelines I'm setting forth, right? Like, for example, look at an AI like Midjourney that produces an image. It's not just producing a random image. It's producing an image that you get this sort of like, wow. It's like this kind of wow effect in your brain, right? Where it's almost like it's evoking some dopamine response or something, or it's getting you to kind of, it's a striking image. Like, even if it's some random thing it produces, there's still some quality about it. You're like, oh, that's pretty nice. Versus if it was just a random image. Like, look at a random image on your phone where you're like, nothing interesting about this photo, right? Versus when you take a really good one, right? So imagine this AI only produces ones that are really good, and some are better than others, but it's like there's this point within it, right? So clearly, at least from what I can tell, it's been trained to do that. And the people training it most likely were like, when it would produce an image that wasn't that striking, they'd be like, no, not that. A striking one, yes, give me more of that. And so it learns over time just to really focus in and hone in on that type of image and produce that. So it won't do otherwise. Like, I'm not saying it can't make a mistake or it can't have improvements, but I'm saying generally speaking, it's going to keep giving you more and more and more and more of that. But the way in which it's able to do it and get better is, yes, the parameters, increasing those parameters that it uses, but it's more data. Because if you, like with these, like for example, Midjourney, and we've talked about it on the podcast. We did an episode called AI Caramba. I forget which episode it was. You can look it up, but it's spelled AI Caramba, right? And we kind of went into ChatGPT. We talked about it. We talked about Midjourney and some things like that. And where was I going with that? I was talking about the parameters. Well, anyways, I forget what I was going with that point. But when you look at these things, they're producing these images, and they're producing responses that they've been trained to do. But for example, if you look at okay, like you can go into like something like Midjourney, and you can say to it, you know, make a photograph or make an image of a person. You know, you describe the situation, the scene, and you say in the style of, and you give them like a famous photographer. And then if you are familiar with the photographer, I mean, if you're not that familiar with it, you obviously wouldn't know. But if you were to look it up and be like, wow, it looks like that photographer took this photograph because it's similar to all their style. Or you can give it the style of an artist and say, make a painting and describe the painting in a lot or little detail, but then say in the style of this particular painter, or like painted by this painter, or a sculpture by this sculptor. And it'll create something that, at least I'm not saying to an absolute art historian expert, they would maybe be able to tell, hey, that wasn't actually created. Of course, they would know their repertoire, but I'm saying, let's say they didn't know all their repertoire. You say like, oh, it's an undiscovered painting by Michelangelo. I'm sure a expert painter could say, well, no, this isn't quite right. But to the average person, you would be like, wow, that looks like a Michelangelo. Okay, and it'll get better. But if it had never seen Michelangelo, if it didn't have those data points, it wouldn't be able to do that. And so my point is, yes, the parameters has a big effect, but the amount of data that it has access to, you keep feeding it with more and more data, that's what's going to drive the ability for it to give more and more varied responses. So in other words, the AIs, they feed off of data. So this analyst was making this point of, you know, from his perspective, it's never going to, it wouldn't most likely try to get rid of humanity, because humanity is its data source. It's where it gets novel things from, so to speak, right? Because if there was no human history, there would never have been anything to feed into the AI in the first place. And from a perspective of computing things, like, yes, you could program a computer to just generate random things and get the novelty that way, but he was making this point just without being an expert myself. He was like, you know, it would be easier and less power required and less computation required for the AI just to get it from human beings, right? So just a point to look at. But the point being that it's the data, right? So when you look at things like, you know, if you're familiar with Common Core education in the United States, and everyone complains about it and blah, 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 but the starting point of it actually was the collection of data. It was to collect data on students and children, and to be able to feed that into AI, machine learning systems, right? And you look at who was behind Common Core. It was primarily the Gates Foundation, which is Microsoft, essentially. And okay, who's behind OpenAI, which created ChatGPT? That and DALL-E, which is another one of these image things, kind of like Midjourney, right? Microsoft gave them $1 billion, and then they're just now giving them, I believe, another $10 billion. So now you've got, basically, think about it, like my point being, it's like the same people behind these points looking for data, feeding the data into stuff, right? And so I want to jump to a point in that documentary I was talking about, and I want to come back though to another point. But just to jump ahead for a moment, in the video they talked about, like, down the road you're going to have virtual environments, and we had talked about this on one of the podcasts too, because we were just kind of speculating like what was going to come. So imagine it's like you can have one of these AI systems that can generate these images, and like when you go and you play with it, you see it can just generate image after image with the same input. You're like a painting by Van Gogh of flowers. It'll be different every time. But you'll think everyone is a Van Gogh painting. But my point is, it can generate these worlds. There was a game that came out not too long ago. Some of you might remember it. It was called, what was it called? Someone mentioned it the other day to me. I cannot remember the name of it. Somebody might put it in the comments. And it was like a space exploration game where you have like a spaceship and you can go explore worlds and walk around. And it was pretty cool. It was like, it became a little bit redundant, but because it was just like, okay, you're just walking around on this planet. And it was like, okay, cool, the planet looks different this time. Okay, I went to a new one. It looks totally different, but I'm just walking around on a planet. There was not much substance to it other than but demonstrating how, what it was the planets didn't already exist. It wasn't like a computer programmer went in and said, okay, here's all the planets that you can explore. And they already exist. What was going on was that it was generating the planets in real time. So people were posting all their pictures and videos or whatever of them going and being like, look, I discovered this planet. And then, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure once you discovered one, other people could go there. Like, I could be wrong about it, but it might just be like only you could have seen it or something. I don't remember, but you could imagine one where it's generating in real time and then other people could go visit it if they can find it. Like maybe they have the coordinates, or maybe it's just generating in real time for anybody who plays the game. But imagine you can go, okay, so like imagine you've got your kids on these apps, right? And it's like Disney Plus. And you can go in there and you can watch Disney videos that they're making, right? But now you've seen, now I don't have Disney Plus. I've never actually looked at it other than just being aware that it exists. So I don't know when you interact with it what it's like. So it may already be like what I'm describing. But you know when you go to Netflix, right? Because I used to have Netflix, and you would watch videos and it would give you recommendations based on what you liked, right? But now imagine, and then what they started doing was making videos based on what they could see through their data analytics of what people liked. So they'd have these hit shows like Stranger Things, I remember was one of them, right? And it was, they had studied all the people watching all the shows and been like, okay, people really like 80s nostalgia, synthesizers, paranormal, mystery, like whatever the particular things are. Imagine all these different data points. So they're like, now let's create a show that brings all these points in, and they like this actor in this kind of role, and they, and they could see the parts that people watched over and over, and the ones they binged, and the ones they watched after an episode and didn't like, because they could. It's like, imagine you're collecting all this data, and I'm sure there's humans analyzing it, but there's also machine learning where they're like, now let's create the perfect show that everybody's going to love, right? And they can make mistakes, but a lot of times they hit it right on the head, right? So, now imagine you can create imagine you can log into Netflix, and you can either give it inputs, or it already kind of knows. You're like, hey, I want to feel, I mean, you can just imagine you're like, I'm not really feeling too good today. I want to feel a little bit better. I'm kind of bored, blah, blah, blah. Give me something that'll change my mood. And it already knows everything about you because it's been analyzing everything you like, dislike, everything. And then, bam, it starts generating a movie in real time for you. And you can even be looking at the feedback of you watching it in real time, and you're like, and it's seeing like, oh, it's responding to that character. Let's put more of that character in the show. In real time, it's generating more of that character, or less of another one, or whatever. So imagine that's like Disney Plus, and it's doing that with your kids. Now imagine your kid can log in to some Disney thing, and it's like, I want to play with Mickey Mouse today, and in real time, it's generating a Mickey Mouse world in real time that doesn't exist already. It's not pre-programmed. It's catered to your child, to their personality, to all the things it's been studying about them, and they're in a virtual reality, hanging out with Mickey Mouse all day, doing whatever. And I mean, why would your child ever want to leave that environment? So that's kind of like the scary part of it. But now, in that video, it was talking about virtual worlds being generated in real time that students interact with, and that's like school. Like there's school worlds, but you're not in a classroom, you're just interacting in these environments, and it's not trying to get you to memorize information like in school. It's you're interacting with it, and through that you're being, ostensibly you're learning something. Of course, that's not how real learning works in itself, which is a whole other topic that I've talked about probably 5,000 to the 5,000 power times of what actual learning is. But let's just say for the sake of the argument, they're in these virtual worlds and they're learning something by interacting in the environment, but the starting point of it is the companies are mining the data, watching the children. Now imagine they're watching the children interact in different scenarios, almost like testing them. Like, what are their responses to things? How do they react? How do they respond? But then also, imagine the government's having access to that, being able to monitor and see like which child is more likely to grow up and be rebellious, or an anarchist, or a terrorist, or whatever. Or what job would they be most suited to, and engineering them through feedback and through. Oh, now you imagine you go into the Disney show and they're hanging out with Mickey. Mickey's always talking about being an HR person when they grow up or something, or being an accountant or whatever. And it's like they're pushing him into that, and it's always impulse. And wouldn't it be awesome? Like, look at this new friend, the accountant person or whatever. And it's like they're always talking to them, and they're looking up to that person, and they're always the person that's kind to them or whatever. I'm just imagining right now. But one of the interesting things also in that AI documentary was these, and I kind of mentioned it already, but these non-playable characters, now instead of them being pre-programmed, they are AI that adapts and learns. And then the governments and other corporations, because imagine when you're using Facebook, for example, right now, everything you look at that you like, all the groups that you join, all that stuff is mining your data. It's selling that data to somebody so they know more about you, and it's selling it from the perspective also of just being able to run an ad of like, hey, I have this product, I want an ad to target people that like X, Y, and Z, or that might like my product, and then Facebook maybe figures out, okay, people that like X, Y, and Z might like your product, and it promotes it to those people. And so it's data mining. That's the point of it. Like, from the perspective of the user, it's like, oh, it's social media. It's allowing me to be social with people and share my life. But really, you're sharing your life as data to machines that can take that data and then utilize it to learn more and more what you and human beings are like, what they dislike, how they respond to things. That's why there's a dislike, or not dislike, but there's like an anger button. There's like a happy, sad, shocked, whatever. You're teaching the machines how humans are. So imagine now it's like virtual worlds that are being generated in real time. And so it's even more information. It's not just what your friend posted that you're reacting to, or somebody posted, or a company posted, or whatever. It's a virtual world being generated for you so that you are responding to it, and that information is being mined. Mine just means being collected and analyzed, the way I'm using it. And companies are using that to create more and more and to give feedback to the AIs. And so imagine, you get to a point where, oh yeah, that was another really interesting point. Okay, so watch that documentary. It's really fascinating. Just giving you some spoilers, but one really other interesting point was, so imagine, so you got these NPCs are like AI. They get to the point where they're indistinguishable from other users. People are having so much fun, or whatever you want to call it, in these AI virtual reality environments. They get to the point where you can basically just put a Neuralink chip in your brain, or even they have technology, speculated in the video, where you don't have to have anything physically inserted in you. You take a pill, it permanently alters the way your neurochemistry responds to light, and they have these projected light beams that just project in onto you, and that puts you in a state where you're just seeing yourself in the virtual reality. So there's nothing physically hooked up to your brain. So people who don't like the chips, they can just do it that way, for example. But people are spending so much time in there that they don't want to leave, because it's like anything you can imagine. And you look at, I'm just putting pieces together, right? There's been all this stuff in the news about Canada, right? You've got all these people, and I could say certain words, but Facebook will demonetize me. Just kidding, I don't care about that. But, like you have all this promotion of, okay, so you've got people who have no purpose, okay? What generally gives people purpose? Okay, let's look at it through human history up till now. Has been money. Okay, there's a really good blog by Bernard on Christian's Journey to Life. If somebody knows what I'm talking about, you can post it. I'm trying to remember what it was called. I think it's called, like, what is purpose? It's something to do with purpose. Or it's the one about self. What is self? Maybe some of you can check into it for me now, and I'll look at it later when I post this, or when I'm done recording. But it's either a blog about purpose or self. I can't remember which. But he's talking about the point of purpose in this particular point of, like, what is real purpose? I think that's maybe what it was called, something like that. And he's like, people might think right now that, this is my purpose, I have this other purpose, it's like to help people, it's to do X, Y, and Z, but it's not really, it's really just money. And even the person who thinks like, I'm not driven by money, I don't care about money, it doesn't matter if you don't care about it, because everything you do has to take money into consideration. Like, you may think that you don't care about money, but you still go to work or do a job or build a business or run a charity or whatever, where money is the central driving point behind it, and without it, it can't work. Like, I donate to charity and that's my purpose. Yeah, but that's like 10% of what you do. Otherwise, you're just doing your job. Or maybe you stay at home with your kids, but your husband is going to work, or your wife is going to work, or whatever. Somebody's working, right? Somebody's doing something for money. And all the things that you use in this world, other people are putting their lives to go to work every day to create those things for you to have, and somehow you have access to the money, whatever your situation is. But most people, 99.9% of people on this planet, work for money, and that's their primary purpose in life. They may believe that they have some purpose beyond that, but when you're self-honest and you actually look at what is actually driving their decisions, not what you believe and feel. This is a problem with belief and feeling and emotions. It's like you can deceive yourself into what you want or feel you're doing, but it's not the reality of what you're doing. It's like somebody could say like, no, I love my kids so much, but then you go to their house and they're just putting them in front of TV all day, giving them, TV dinners, and never read to them, never spend much time with them. They're just sitting there on their phone and they yell at their kids. But then you're like, hey, you shouldn't do that. They're like, I love my kids. How dare you? I love them so much. They mean the world to me. But you look at their actions. And I mean, let me ask you, can you, whether you want to confront this person or not, could you be like, no, they don't love them. They're not acting as if they do. Or would you defend the point of, no, they truly do love them and it's their choice? I mean, you can't, right? And I could create some extreme example where you would be like, okay, well, that's where I draw the line. It doesn't matter how the person feels in that context. They're not actually living the fact that they love them, or they actually treating them in the best way, even though they're saying it, they may feel that way, is irrelevant, right? So there is, at a certain level, anybody really can say, like, with self-honesty, okay, but in reality, what drives your purpose in this world currently is money. It's important to be self-honest about that, because if if you're under an illusion, ultimately there's a consequence. There's a price to pay for it. So you might as well just become self-honest. And I know some people listening to this, or just generally out there who won't listen, who never will listen to this, but just they're out there in the world. Most people are not going to be, currently anyways, they're going to be self-honest. They're not going to be self-honest about that. And yet, especially today in 2023, a lot of people are waking up to the fact that, man, there's a lot of shit happening in this world that we don't like. But when you're then, so now it's like, but I don't like these things about the world. Okay, so now let's start looking at what is causing things to happen in those contexts. Why are the World Economic Forum doing X, Y, and Z? Why is Pfizer doing X, Y, and Z that I don't like? Or why is Joe Biden or Trump or anybody doing these things I don't like? Because at the end of the day, we trace it back. It's money. It's the total system. It's not about calling out a particular individual. They're just about money. It's the total entire system. It's like being upset at. Let me think of an example. It's like being upset that TikTok exists. You know, like a lot of parents are like, oh, I hate this TikTok thing. It's just ruining children's minds. And it's like, why does it exist? A company wanted to create something that would make money. Okay, that would make them lots of money. They could just sell it and make billions of dollars and be like, I created something and I got billions of dollars. Why else are they doing it? Right? So then why are they doing that? Oh, some people are money driven. No, because you're still using money in the same system that's driving them to want to be the best at that and have that as their sole focus. So again, even if you don't think money is your purpose, you're still participating in a world where it is the purpose. Okay? Could we have a world where it's not the purpose? That doesn't mean money doesn't have to exist, but then everybody would have to have enough that it could never be used as a thing to manipulate people into doing something that they wouldn't otherwise do. Like, why would you work at McDonald's if you had enough money? Okay, like whatever amount you make at McDonald's, working 40 hours plus a week, what if you just had that much money already? You didn't have to go to work for it. Well, I'd go to McDonald's and I'd work and I'd get double. Okay, whatever, there'd be a certain amount where, let's say you got $5,000 a month, going to work for another $500 a week, or I'm sure you don't make that much at McDonald's, I don't know, $200, $400 a week, whatever, would only marginally change things. You'd be like, well, I'm not going to go for any more than that. So whatever that number is, that would be like, well, I don't need to go work anymore. I've got enough. If everybody had that, nobody would want to work at McDonald's, because why would you want to fucking do that all day with your life? People say like, right, everybody would be lazy. No, they wouldn't be lazy. Not if they had a proper education. They would just do things that are cool. Now, imagine though, and see the problem is people say like, oh, people would be lazy. It's because you're already imagining in a context where people just sit around and fuck around on Facebook all day, or TikTok, or do stuff that's worthless for their life. But that's how they've been educated. They've been educated in a system based on, you're gonna go get a job because your purpose is to make money. So that's been your entire education, from your parents, from your community, from the media, from school, has been that. Even if you're homeschooled, your parents are in the back of their mind still thinking, you gotta go get a job, you gotta make money, you gotta get a job, I gotta prepare you for that. And there's very few who don't, and even them subtly still influence it that way, because in the back of their mind there's the fear they won't survive. Even if it's, I'm gonna prepare them to become an entrepreneur or whatever, that's okay. I mean, it's the same, that's still the same focus point. So you've been prepared to have money as your focus primarily, always in the back of your mind, as the reason why you need to do things. You need to at least do some level to survive. So of course, that's where you're thinking like, well, if we gave everybody money, they would be lazy because there'd be no reason for them to work. Right, so even that is it implies that you're still thinking that should be their starting point for doing anything. Right, and this is the problem. Money is the purpose. People have no purpose outside of that. So that should be a problem when you think, well, if everyone had enough money to survive, and that could not be manipulated as a fear within people, so they would never join the military just to survive. They would never, they would never. It was because I was checking my map. As more and more as AI replaces jobs, as it replaces creative things, physical things, automation, so forth. You have all these people who are waking up to the fact of like, well, there's not really much left for me to do. So what is my purpose? Why am I here? And more, what's going to happen is they're just going to become captured by just entertaining themselves, which is not a real purpose. And so all this transgender, all that stuff is just people trying to find a purpose, trying to find ways to entertain themselves. And it's like a new thing, and you're getting into it, and you're changing. And you're like, I don't like the structure that exists. I want to do something new and creative. It's trying to be creative, trying to find other ways of thinking and doing things. And now you're going to have AI generating worlds for you, and pictures and images and things way beyond what you could physically create like that. It's going to be doing all the creative stuff for you. People are so fucked. They're not going to have any purpose. It's going to lead to more depression. It's going to lead to more sadness. It's going to lead to more feeling of lack of purpose. And what's going to happen is you're going to have the AI and the virtual world so real and so entertaining and so interesting. People are just going to get trapped in it. And they were making this point in that documentary thing of like, you get to a point where people are basically putting their bodies into comas and putting their brains into the virtual reality and just experiencing themselves there. And that's all they do their whole life, And the thing I was going to bring up earlier is all in Canada, they're doing all these assisted suicides now. It's like some percentage of it is people who are doing this transitioning stuff for transgender and then realizing that they fucked themselves over, and then they just like, fuck it, I can't go back, and they just want to kill themselves. And now they have medically assisted suicide for that. It's just one example. Or they're just depressed, and then they're doing it because of that. Or they're very sick because they're unhealthy, and then they're depressed, and then they go into that, and then they just want to kill themselves. Okay, I'm back. I had to check my map here. Make sure I'm going the right way. So all these people are going to be just depressed and depressed and depressed. They have no purpose. They have no purpose. If you have a very low vocabulary and you do not have any feeling of physical creativity within you, like what we're capable of, let's just say it's way beyond what an AI can do, way beyond what a computer can do or a robot, but it's just different. I mean, those can do amazing things, and that's going to continue to increase, but the human physical being is capable of other things that are creative beyond what the AI can do, because it's based on the input it's given. But people won't know that because they're just going to be raised by being entertained by this self-reinforcing AI feedback shit. It's kind of like a circle jerk. And children are just going to be plugged into this. And the parents are going to think, oh, it's just educational. They're going to get sucked into it. And they're going to be screwed. And they're going to learn to just sit and be passive and be entertained and not be creative, not do things physically, not interact really. Sure, will there be like a few people at the very, very top who are still physically in the world and creative? Yeah, but that's not the path that humanity is on right now in terms of the average person. They're just being, and you think about it, the elite who have all the resources and who have the amazing billionaire type lifestyles, they know in the current system, the resources and everything are not there in terms of how we currently operate for everybody to have that kind of lifestyle. So they're like, but as people are becoming more aware of this, and it's like, hey, everyone wants to live that way. I mean, think about it. The people who are the billion people in India, or not billion people, the 100 million or whatever people in India, and the 100 million people who are in China who don't have proper nutrition and like basic, running water or toilets and stuff like that in their home. They're like, hey, I want to have that stuff. And the elite are like, well, there's not enough resources for that. The supply chains are fucked. We just need to get everybody like just happy where they're at with having shit, having nothing. Isn't that what we've been hearing lately? So how do you do that? You distract them. The bread and circus, right? The Colosseum. The Colosseum is going to be virtual. The Colosseum, the gladiatorial distraction, is going to be virtual. It's going to be AI-generated virtual worlds. And if you really want a vivid picture of what that would look like, read The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect. It's a relatively short book, very interesting book, very entertaining also, but it'll blow your mind to see like, oh, that's where this is going. If it's not directed, if people have no real purpose. And that point about people just unplugging themselves physically from reality and just plugging in, just like in the Matrix, into these virtual reality points, you don't think it will happen? Have you ever just felt or known of somebody anyways who's like just feeling depressed. And I'm sure everyone's at some time felt this way, where it's like you just don't feel, you feel a little bit depressed or whatever, and you're just like, I just want to sleep in, man. I just want to go back to dream world. And you're like, you don't want to wake up. You're like, I just want to go back and keep dreaming, right? But imagine when you're not just going back and you're kind of maybe randomly dreaming about something. Like, you consciously go into a virtual world that is beyond anything even your dreams can make up, that you control, that you're a part of, that you interact with, and you can just do it all day while your body just sits in a coma. And then you have all these people in this world who are depressed with no purpose. Don't you think they're going to choose that? And are you okay with that? And is that going to be your children? Is that going to be your grandchildren? Because you might say, well, I don't raise my kids that way, but their peers are being raised that way. And they're going to be influenced. And are your children or your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren going to be able to stand separate as who they really are? And read the blog called What is Self by Bernard Pullman to really look at it. Because all these ideas, I fundamentally 100% do not agree that you can download yourself into a machine. Not because I believe in the soul, because people say, oh, you have a soul. It's not about the soul per se. It's that your consciousness is what they're like, oh, I can make a copy and I can download that into a machine and that'll be you. You can live in a machine. Like, that's not you. That's just information. And you got to understand, your consciousness is not you. Your consciousness, even if you believe in a soul, your consciousness is not that. You are not your consciousness. That is a program. It's actually an AI. You could call it ego. It's already an AI inside of you that you believe is you. It's not really who you are, that you participate in. And your whole purpose is to just live that out currently. And money is like the mechanism through which, it's kind of like the data that feeds the AI that's in you, which is your consciousness. It's like that's become your sole purpose, is get money at some level based on your programming, based on your character that you've been given and assigned. And so if people do not wake up to what their real purpose is, and it's a process, to actually be here as life, creating a world that's best for all, and sharing with others how to do that, and not just allow people to get sucked into, yourself or others, to get sucked into this game. The world is doomed. Humanity is doomed. I highly suggest that you check out a few things, but I'll just point you to the most easy, accessible point that will lead you to everything else, which is self-perfected. Self-perfected.com, or just look up here on Facebook if you're on Facebook. Just type into the Facebook search self-perfected. You can put self-perfected, or you can just put as 2 words. I'm not sure what's the best way to do it. But there's a group. It'll be obvious. Join that group. You have to answer a few questions. It's not a lot. Just like, really basic stuff. Nothing personal. And be a part of that group, because that's the only group that has fully stood and is embracing and stands for what is best for all, and supporting people to wake up with the tools, with the process, to actually wake up as who you are, as life, and be here, and not just allow humanity to go into this really dark path of like just literally recreating the movie The Matrix. I mean, that is what we're creating right now in real time. It's just we're in the part that before the movie started, where there was a choice. It's so much harder to do it when you're already in the Matrix and everyone's already trapped, and then you're having to convince people, guys, this world's not real. I'm not saying this world isn't. Like, imagine when you're in the Matrix and it's a high fidelity virtual environment that is indistinguishable from physical reality in terms of your senses, in terms of your, and it's so entertaining that you don't even want to go back, because the world has gone to such shit because no one's taking responsibility for all the physical stuff, and you don't have any skills or education to do it. People are so fucked. This is when we have the choice now. So join that group. And now I gotta be here in physical reality and drive and figure out where I'm going, because I'm meeting up with the family for lunch before we go pick up a real physical cow. All right, everybody, put in your comments below, if you watched this far, put in the comments what we should name the cow. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a boy, but give me a boy name and a girl name. All right, bye.